There you go.
Looks like it. Okay. Well, we will call the committee into session, and approval of the agenda. Anyone have any comments about the agenda or want to shift anything around? Okay. Adoption of minutes. I wasn't here at the last meeting, so does anybody want to move?
I think we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, motion to approve the agenda. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, unanimous. Yeah, keep track of it. Okay. Okay, then do I have a motion on the minutes? Kirsty?
Move to, they be approved.
Second.
Okay, David French, second. All in favor? Okay, unanimous.
Sorry if I join you.
Yeah, who's this?
I'm Greg Cormier. I'm going to take care of the presentation with Steph Code today.
Oh, hi, okay. Yes.
I'll vouch for him. You can sit with me, Greg.
Oh, thanks.
We just got started.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Dennis Wilson is our chair.
And you are?
Greg Cormier.
Greg.
Yes.
Meet you. Okay, are you observing or?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll say to Greg is just expected to be our building inspector here.
Oh.
Okay.
So,
Okay, well,
yes, as a,
I'm Steph, I'm the committee clerk. Colleagues.
So everybody likes you.
Cool.
Do you guys want to introduce the
Sure. Kirsty Johnstone,
Hello.
ABC member.
David Wrench.
Hello.
okay.
James Cleveland, talent
I
tonight.
just finished reading your book too.
Oh, wow.
I'm Lisa Wrench. I'm going to be taking minutes when Steph's not available.
Oh, are you
Great to meet you.
related?
Class act.
Great. And Dennis Wilson, acting chair today.
And I'm Dave. Nice to see you. I didn't know you were the new inspector. When has that started already?
No, we just sort of today.
Cool.
When do you start?
The end of the month. Yeah, 1st of February. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, here for the presentations. That's
Oh, yeah.
okay. Okay, we have evidently no public comments. There's nobody from the public in this. You all, okay. Okay, hopefully this will be fairly quick. Elections for chair of the committee.
So, the only email I received was from Drew. Anybody who's interested in being chair.
Drew said he would do it if nobody
Yeah.
else would. wasn't it?
And I vote for Drew.
In one of his absence.
Okay, you put forward Drew.
Especially if he's not going to come to the meeting.
Anyone else?
David?
No.
Okay, all in favor for Drew as chair?
Absolutely.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, vice chair.
The status quo is pretty good.
What about the guy who went to Hawaii?
Vice chair?
Anyone want to nominate Dennis?
I do.
Okay, David, and second by Kirsty. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Great, done. Setting the meeting schedule. We've been at third week, every third week, right? So we keep, won't we also be missing not just August, but December?
Maybe the 17th, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's,
I hope so.
it always hits that way.
Seems to be that way, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll.
Are you guys still happy with the time? Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't get to say.
Yeah, I've got 2 more meetings. Actually, one, I'm gonna be away for the March meeting.
Are you retiring?
I am.
Oh, darn.
Yeah. Another mandatory, no, not mandatory, it's there's mandatory retirement or something. Although David's been a member longer than I have.
Yeah, well, if they want to kick me off, I'll go.
Okay, so all in favor of the third Monday of every month except for August and December? Okay, unanimous. Okay, James Lee.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me tonight, everybody. I've got about, I guess, half an hour, 20 minutes on the agenda. And I'm here tonight to bring you up to speed on this new provincial regulation that's available to local governments like BIM. And I've been doing this because I spent a lot of last year working closely with the team that developed the standard, the Energy Step Code Council. I was serving as the lead communications advisor for that collaboration, which is in South under the jurisdiction of the province, the Building and Safety and Standards branch. So basically, the standard was coming out, they wanted to be able to communicate it and explain it and to stakeholders, to governments, and to industry. And so I run a small boutique communications firm, and basically I support governments and companies and organizations that are growing the low carbon economy. That's my specialized focus, and so I was quite pleased to be able to provide that support. Developed a number of projects, including this best practices guide, which I'll leave with Daniel at the end of the night. But it's essentially, this will be a required reading for you if you haven't seen it already, for sure. And it's a really cool document. So I'm here just basically to, in an unofficial capacity, I'm not a member of the Step Code Council. I'm an interested citizen, I guess you could say, who happens to have some knowledge of how it works, and I wanted to share that with you all because there may come a point where if the municipality decides to adopt a step code to reference it in building bylaws, it will likely be referring to this committee, subdivision applications and so forth. And so I thought it would be helpful to have a grounding in what it's about. You're also kind of a guinea pig audience, I'll confess, because I've, since accepting this invitation, I've been asked to present this to council on the 22nd as a delegation. So those who missed tonight can join us for that or watch it on video or whatever.
Okay. James, is that best practices PDF as well? Is that
Yep,
something
it is.
you could share with members?
Yep, I will, and you can get that through, if you go to energystepcode.ca, that will redirect you to the province's Building Safety and Standards branch where you can get it there. It is nice to have a hard copy though, but they're primarily intended for local government planners. So each municipality around the province will have one of these, or should have one of these on the shelf.
Well, if we could get that
For sure.
document, and then we just.
For sure.
We'll send that out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right, okay, cool.
Super.
So any questions about what we're gonna cover or why I'm here or anything, or should I just dive right in? Okay.
Jump right in.
Awesome. Okay, so, let me see if I got this right. Boom. Okay. So, I don't know if anybody wants to turn their chairs. There are gonna be some slides that will be easier to see rather than just talk about. So let's start at the big picture. What is the Energy Step Code? So the BC Energy Step Code is a new provincial regulation that local governments can use if they wish to incentivize or require a level of energy efficiency in new construction that goes above and beyond the requirements of the BC Building Code. So just to unpack that, it's voluntary. Local governments can use it if they want to, they don't have to. But those that do will be using it because they want to require higher building performance than the code requires out of the box. Builders and developers can also use the step code voluntarily. If they're building a new development, subdivision, they may signal to the local government, hey, we're going to voluntarily build this to step X, a certain level. It was signed into regulation in April of last year and went into force December 15th. So it's legal, it's law now, and it's enforceable now. Really, it gives local governments a powerful tool to reduce GHG emissions and also provides the construction and design and development sectors with a shared set of requirements across the province on how to measure energy efficiency. So it's a shared language rather than using an ad hoc approach. Common metrics, shared standards. So the building industry actually really likes it, as I'll get to it in a minute. A couple of key caveats and characteristics. It's performance-based. The current building code on energy has a huge section, hundreds of pages, saying you have to use this door with this window, with this wall, and so on and so forth. This basically throws all that aside for governments that want to use it and say you have to reach these levels of performance. They have to be measurable and provable. And then once you've done that, you're in compliance with whatever bylaw or incentive is available. Again, it only applies to new construction. It's not a retrofit strategy that's coming, but it probably will be quite a ways out just because of the inherent challenges of tackling the existing building stock. Governments can only, it's grouped into lower steps and upper steps. The lower steps are attainable today, as I'll explain. The upper steps are going to involve techniques and practices and materials that are more difficult and won't be as familiar to builders. And so for that reason, because the province wants to build capacity in industry to slowly and not shock the market, governments can only require the lower steps until 2020. And they can incentivize the upper steps, but they can't require the upper steps until after 2020. And that capacity's been built. Okay? And for example, they are doing that already, as we'll get to in a second. The City of North Vancouver has already implemented the step code, and they have an incentive for step 5, the highest step, that's tied to development density. So if a developer wants to build to that, they can build more floor area in their tower and make more money off the site. So that's how they're going. Okay, so that's the high level. So as you can see by this graphic, this kind of explains a high level principle. It's kind of designed as a roadmap to take the province to the year 2032, and that's the year that the BC Building Code will require every new building, home, and everything will be constructed to a net zero energy ready level of performance. That's a provincial target that's been set, and they're quite serious about it. And this is roughly equivalent to Passive House level of certification, or the Canadian Home Builders Association has a net zero energy ready label and certification as well. So in the coming years, governments are going to, the idea is that governments climb the steps and gradually increase the requirements of new buildings. And that allows, again, the construction design industries to grow more comfortable with the new products and techniques that will be needed to get there. And along the way, as that capacity increases, familiarity increases, it'll start to ideally stimulate a local manufacturing market for high performance building materials and products like triple pane windows. There's one builder on the island who built a passive house. He got his windows from Ireland. That's where he had to go to get that level of performance. So there's manufacturers in the Fraser Valley. They will all of a sudden see a market has been created for their products, so we'll start to see stimulating that manufacturing sector. So the costs will come down for those products because they'll be more readily available. Okay, just briefly, I want to talk about what the national policy context is, then the provincial context around high performance buildings. So there's two federal initiatives that are currently informing policy context around built environment. The first on the left is the Pan-Canadian Framework for Clean Growth and Climate Change. This is Canada's climate plan. It was adopted in December 2015. And specific to buildings, it says that provinces and territories will work to adopt increasingly stringent model building codes starting in 2020 with the goal of a net zero energy ready model building code by 2030. So Ottawa is on board with this direction that the province was already setting this target for 2032. Ottawa is actually pushing it a little bit earlier, 2030. The second document is a pretty fascinating document if you haven't seen it. It came out last summer. It's Canada's building strategy. It's meant to be the implementation piece of that target in the Pan-Canadian framework, and essentially is pretty visionary. It sets out, starting this year, there's going to be funding, federal funding for research, development, demonstration projects to lower the cost of building high-performance and net zero energy homes and buildings. There's going to be new programs, new support, and eventually there's going to be more stringent model codes for buildings and homes by 2020. So Ottawa is very much on board, and right now BC is leading the country in terms of figuring out how to make it happen, as we'll get to in a second. You know, and it has language like, come on in, the future feels fine. It's very visionary and exciting vision in that document. So provincial context. So there's Minister George Heyman up front there, our Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy provincially. So previously, the province in the previous government set a goal of net zero ready by 2032. And net zero energy buildings, of course, are so efficient that they can meet all of their own energy needs on site with solar panels or other renewable technologies. And by the way, jump in and interrupt me if I'm just blabbing or if I'm getting too far ahead or whatever. So this is the end goal, and a net zero building, energy ready building, is about 80% more energy efficient than a typical new building. And so the climate leadership team was convened by the previous government. They put out some recommendations. The government ignored them, put them on the shelf, and didn't really do much with them. But those recommendations included a number of pretty sector-specific targets, one of which is for buildings. New government comes along, has basically reconvened a new advisory team to take the recommendations from the old one and tell them, how do we make this happen? We want to do all of this. So that's what this new team is working on right now. They were just formed in October. We don't have a timeline yet, but essentially what they did say is that the minister wants to set a new GHG target specific to buildings, and that will be 50% below 2005 levels by 2030. So the STEP code happens to be a really powerful policy tool to achieve that objective. So we're expecting, or I'm expecting, that the province will start talking about it a lot more. They've been pretty quiet on it so far because it's a new government and I think they have other priorities right now. But expect to see a lot more about the STEP code coming out of the province. Okay, so who developed it? If you look on the left there, those are some of the organizations and entities that came together to, over the course of 2.5 years, to hammer out and negotiate the specifications and the metrics in the STEP code. So you've got Local Government Management Association, UBCM, the gas utility, BC Hydro, and the largest building and development associations in BC, UDI and CHBA British Columbia, also Home Builders Association Vancouver, and the province, architectural, engineers, everybody all came together to develop it. So as a result, it's widely supported. It's robustly supported. It's not some hippie green buildings thing that's come out of nowhere that we're trying to sell people on. It's already across the board adapted. So again, local governments, province, NGOs, utilities, trades, designers, builders. It's pretty cool. And again, that's what makes this tool unique and the most advanced in the country, because others are just starting to figure out how we can do this. So all of these have come together to form now the STEP Code Council, which is the group that retained me last year to develop some of the branding. So what does it measure? Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. So for Part 9, which is a section of the building code that addresses homes and smaller and more simple buildings, including row houses and condo buildings up to 3 stories, but not higher. It measures the quality of the building envelope, it measures equipment and systems, and it measures airtightness. And again, these requirements are set differently for different regions of the province. In the north, it can be harder to meet these targets because it's colder outside. So they've adjusted the targets by climate zone for all around the province. So the STEP code is regionally specific, but has common metrics across the board for the different sections of the building code, different kinds of buildings. So it's really been thought through. And again, builders aren't told how to meet those metrics. They're just, it's up to them to work and figure out solutions for how they can deliver on those performance levels. So what does it require of builders?
When you talk, excuse me, when you talk about the metrics, is the metrics requiring, say, if we, in this climate, 2x6 walls,
Nope.
stud walls, and then
Not
further
quite.
north, it's going to be a deeper, thicker wall, or more insulation, or
So it doesn't, so
might
that's the
that-
way it kind of works now. And in that you have to specify it's got to be this thick with this window. What they've done instead is use an energy modeling software. So they've set a bunch of metrics for things like TEDI, total energy, design intensity, it's always here, thank you, yeah. Thermal energy demand intensity, peak thermal load, the equipment and systems metrics are mechanical energy use intensity. So these are building science metrics that you can determine through software and through checking the equipment that's proposed for the building.
Okay.
Yeah, and also air tightness, that's the last thing on there,
Yeah.
which you can check with the blower door test. So first off the top, I'm a builder who wants to build a building and that's in a jurisdiction that's referencing the STEP code. We'll need to do an energy model of the building to find out the level of performance it would yield based on wall thickness, orientation, mechanical systems, and so forth. And then they basically tweak the design to reach the satisfaction of the requirements for those building science metrics. They build the building, paying special attention particularly to building envelope, because it's very much focused on the DNA of the building rather than on equipment. It's about how the walls are constructed. Something that never gets changed throughout the whole life of the building, basically. You can swap out the appliances, upgrade the kitchen, but your wall is going to stay your wall. So that's where the focus is for the STEP code. And then after the building is built, an on-site blower door test is conducted to verify the air tightness meets the requirements for the given step. The building is sealed up tightly. Any questions so far on any of that?
Just a question, I assume that precludes fireplaces.
So it's probably going to be difficult to have a fireplace with a building that's built to the higher steps of the STEP code because it's a giant hole in the building
Right.
envelope. Yeah. So
I mean, a fireplace as opposed to an airtight.
Well, even an airtight.
even an airtight, you're looking
Even
at
an airtight.
penetrations of the envelope is what you need to avoid because that's an avenue for heat loss that will show up in the building modeling. So it's a good question and one that I'd love to actually get an answer from the STEP code
Must
council.
be
on.
too popular in Bowman.
No.
Maybe not, but yeah. I mean,
We save a lot of energy burning wood here.
well, you'll find that you'll light a fire in your wood stove in a STEP code home, and then you'll be sweating yourself silly because the building is so insulated that heat won't go anywhere, and that you'll quickly overheat the space, I would guess.
Well, if it's airtight, the fireplace won't burn either.
Well, no,
You get-
because the building is supplied with fresh makeup air, but it's done so through a heat recovery ventilator that
If the
is
electricity doesn't go off.
right.
I
Okay.
don't, all this stuff for Bowman it doesn't, I
Okay.
don't think we're in this.
All right. So I'm going to keep going. And I want to walk through how does it work for homes, essentially. And so step one, and again, this is the section of the building code that addresses homes. Step one is essentially enhanced compliance. BC Housing did a study, and they found that even code-built houses, over something like a huge number, 60%, did not even meet when they were checked after the fact the baseline prescriptive requirements of energy efficiency in the code. So they weren't even code compliant, even though they were built to code, pass inspection, and so forth. So step one is just verifying that you've met the requirements of code with a blower door test and with an energy model. So that's the very baby step to get started. Steps 2 and 3 are the next step up, and as you can see on the right, those are the increasing levels of energy efficiency that they represent. If you're looking at labels like a built green type standard that's often applied to houses, would fit into this kind of category. So Energy Star, R2000, there are already a lot of buildings built in BC to this level of performance. When we go beyond that, we get into the upper steps. And the upper steps are 4 and 5, and these are trickier to accomplish without rethinking the way buildings are put together. And again, this is like a passive house level of approach with continuous insulation around the envelope, usually triple glazed windows, careful consideration of orientation for solar gain. You have to really think hard about your building to get to this level of performance. And eventually at the top, step 5, is a house that's net zero ready. You could put solar panels on the roof and then meet all of your energy needs for that building without having to pay anything to a utility. And that's the end game in 2032. So the idea again is that governments climb these steps and get towards a net zero energy ready level by 2032. So why bother? Because I love my fireplace. Well, here are some of the benefits of better performing buildings. They better manage temperature. You don't get the spikes of a baseboard heater clicking on and off. The room gets cold, it gets warm again, it gets cold and warm, you get drafts circulating through. They better manage fresh air because the upper steps require active ventilation. So they're putting fresh air into particularly sleeping spaces, which reduces the carbon dioxide buildup that happens in the room or in an office where by 3 p.m. you've used all the air in the building. It's like you're on a cross-country flight and you pretty much aren't good for anything except watching a video at that point. So it circulates fresh air through the building. Soundproofing, all that insulation also makes your building quieter. Not so much a factor here on Bowen, of course, but certainly a benefit for those who live in cities and suburbs. Obviously lower utility bills. Your building will be cheaper to run. That's why the Affordable Housing Authority in BC Housing is specifying step code high performance for all its buildings because they do not pass the burden of energy costs on to future tenants. Greenhouse gas emissions is the other one. I'm going to get to that in a minute because there's work that's been done by a separate group that's really quite interesting. It really has enormous potential to help meet our climate targets. The local manufacturing I mentioned, and also the industry loves this or likes it because it offers them consistency and predictability. It sends them a long-term goal of where the code is going on efficiency instead of having to scramble every time a code update comes out and they have to try and understand the implications and what to do. They know what's coming. The code is going to follow along behind the step code. So as more governments start to use step 3, we're going to see the code start to adapt those steps so they become the standard, and in that way gradually the whole system climbs the ladder. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So what does it cost? What's it going to cost? Very first question that comes up. BC Housing commissioned a metrics research report last year. It is probably the most ambitious study of the cost implications of high performance buildings in Canada ever commissioned. Millions of scenarios, consulted with builders across the province to test the conclusions. And in the end, what they found is that these are the 2 quotes that stick out the most, meaning the lower steps involve only modest construction premiums. In most situations, builders can meet the lower steps for less than 2% cost premium above that of a home built to code. So this isn't, one of these expensive boutique, LEED, whatever buildings. It's doable. There is a cost premium, but it's modest, and especially given that the energy costs are going to be lower and the climate benefits are real, there's a lot of good reasons to do it. I've pulled a couple of examples out of that study. Here, just to show you, they modeled specific building types in specific places. So this was a hypothetical row house project in Surrey. And what they found was for a unit that would be 1,700 square feet, that would sell as a new building for $550,000 to $800,000. You're talking about adding just shy of $3,000 to the per unit build cost for that unit. So classic line is, well, do you want the alarm system? Well, that's another $1,000. Do you want the double garage? That's another $10,000. Do you want the granite instead of the Formica? So in other words, this cost is not a big premium when you look at a financing of a house or a home that's $800,000. But that's what we're looking at to meet step 3, which is the top of the lower steps. And same again for a medium-sized single-family home. In Surrey, step 3 would add, they figure $3,675 to the cost to build that house. Now that isn't the sales price, that's the cost to build. Sales price of the home is largely a factor of the land and location where it is. So those are some of the numbers, and those are also in the article that was attached to your agenda if you want to dig deeper into it. All right, so then I wanted to introduce you to this because the Energy Step Code Council does not have a mandate to advocate for step code uptake. Simply, their mission is simply to educate and inform that it exists. That's given rise to a coalition of organizations that are going around local governments in BC, making the case for why they should start at step 3. And we've seen that happening. Because we'll get to in a second, but the City of North Vancouver now will require step 3 as of July 1st of this year. District of West Van, our other neighbor across the water, is voting on that on January 22nd as well to adopt step 3 community-wide as of July 1st. And District of North Vancouver has signaled the same thing. They haven't scheduled a meeting yet, but that would create this market of high-performance talent across the North Shore that potentially Bowen could access those skills and trades. Ditto Squamish, ditto Whistler. So really the whole Sea to Sky corridor. And they're basing their research on digging really deep into that housing costing report. And here's who's involved in it. A number of NGOs and consulting firms, HCMA Architecture, Passive House Canada, Canada Green Building Council, and Reflective Consulting. So they're basically shopping a presentation similar to this one, but with more of a focus on climate benefits. I asked them if I could have some material from their presentation, so I just pasted it right in here. And this is the climate impacts of row housing, going from step 2 to step 3. And this is assuming that every Metro Vancouver municipality adopts step 3. This is the benefit they've modeled. That greenhouse gases would be dropped 42% below what they would be for doing step 2. So you can see that the marginal increase from step 2 to 3 is really pretty small, but the climate impact is quite significant. So it only adds a 1.1% cost premium, but you get 42% lower greenhouse gases.
Who did the costing estimates?
The costing estimate was done by Remy and Associates and Integral Group with help from, if I go back, that's all on the cover page of the report. BC Housing was the publisher, E3 Eco Group, Integral Group, and Morrison Hirschfeld, that's the other firm.
The numbers don't ring true to me.
Okay.
They just,
I'm going to get you the original material on that, so you could take a look at that.
How would that function with building building inspectors and getting your building permits? Who does that modeling? The architect does it when he designs the house? The municipality does it?
Yeah, so it's the builder's responsibility to get that work done, and they would hire a certified energy advisor, which is an emerging profession of people that do blower door tests, and they also they run the HOT 2000 or another software program that they plug in the designs of the construction drawings, and they can make assumptions and they can generate numbers that correspond. So those aren't really expensive. I seem to remember that running an energy model is about $600. Lower test might be another $400, and that's built into that cost premium number that you saw there.
So that all that modeling and stuff.
Right, and so the building inspector has a form that's just been developed and is available to building officials that allows them to basically fill in, okay, we require step this, and then those numbers are filled in, and they take the report from the energy modeler and they verify compliance.
Okay.
And that keeps the process high integrity, and it assures the municipality that the conditions are being met. So,
Okay.
Could I ask a question? Suppose I'm a builder and tell my client that I'll build them to step 3 and make all the arrangements, and it turns out I don't do a very good job. Other than the blower test, will they be doing things like thermal imaging around the house and that sort of thing? And what will the penalties be for a completely built house that doesn't come up to standard?
well, it's unlikely that would happen because you wouldn't be able to get your building permit until you had an energy model result that verified compliance. So then it's the building inspector's job to go out there to make sure the building that's in the model, that's in the plans have been adjusted to comply, is being built. And so if you built a building that didn't meet the requirements of a certain step, you basically have to bring it into compliance. And that would involve usually, revisiting your equipment to do it the way you said you would do it in the energy model, or paying more close attention to sealing up the envelope, things like that.
I would imagine too, we'd probably see people essentially overdoing it. Because I've been thinking the same thing, right? We say everyone needs to be step 3. You model it. You just make step 3. You've got a shoddy crew who comes and they don't seal stuff or whatever, and it's not sealed, and you test it and you fail. It's like, oh.
Well,
So you'd rather probably aim higher and say we'll do a little bit better
Right.
because then we've got a little bit of wiggle. But I mean, there's always some people who will probably try to skirt the line. And think
yeah,
just
so
get
builders that I spoke to have said that the step code is going to take all of the bottom feeders out of the market, essentially. You're going to be out of business if you can't build to this level.
because if you
Very
just do it
quickly.
once and you fail your
That's
test.
right, that's right. So there are a lot of companies that have dodgy practices that barely meet the code. I mean, friends of mine have taken pictures of tract houses they bought in Squamish where it's not even a junction box set behind the light fixture, it's just wires coming out of the drywall. And I just shake my head, how is that even possible? All of those companies are gonna be shut down out of the market. So we're gonna see improved housing quality as a result.
Are there site planning issues besides just southern orientation and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
That also.
So that comes
part of
more
this?
into play for the upper steps, and massing is a big one, orientation as well, but, for example, a building has a lot of little dormers on it and, bump outs and things. It's gonna be harder for those designs to meet the upper steps, just because there's more surface area to the envelope for thermal bridging and so forth. So it doesn't force us into cubes. That's a stereotype about passive house and little tiny windows. There's some beautiful examples of designs that meet the very highest levels. It definitely pushes out for thinking hard about those issues.
Anything in there for things like water retention and that sort of thing?
Not considered, it's only
That's
energy
sort of
related.
environmental, considered an
Right.
environmental issue.
Right.
That may be important to us here, although.
For sure, and, you can use a step code and then also require other factors like water, materials, and so forth. That's more the realm of the LEED system, which really doesn't consider energy, and so a lot of local governments have been using LEED, but they haven't been tackling energy as a result, and many of them are now replacing or phasing out those bylaws and intend to bring in step code instead. So it doesn't make LEED obsolete, but it's a different focus, for sure. Okay, so large single-family home. This was the other piece that I pulled out of the study. Again, going to step 3 is a 95% reduction in greenhouse gases. And this is assuming, again, all Metro Vancouver municipalities adopted step 3, and that they're all using natural gas as their primary energy source for heating. We don't use that here, of course, and I don't even know if there's homes that heat with a propane-based system. Do they?
Propane fireplaces, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
propane.
it's expensive if that was your only heat.
Yeah.
Some people have propane heat.
And there's oil heat, but not for any new builds, but anybody use oil, of course, so that's not a factor as well
Yeah.
for this, So it's less a climate benefit for Bowen and more the other reasons to reduce energy utility costs, BC Hydro costs basically significantly. I don't know what your hydro bill was, but mine was pretty nutty last winter. This winter it's been pretty mild, but if I had a step code 3 house, it wouldn't be anywhere near that. So that's 3 for all. This is the last slide. They did a projection out to 2030. And they found some very significant GHG reductions, again, around Metro Vancouver. Cumulative avoided carbon climate pollution, 696,000.4 thousand tons of CO2e cumulatively over that whole time period. And just for reference, the city of Vancouver produces about 900,000 tons a year of climate pollution from all sources. So it's a big chunk. It's like reducing almost the entire city of Vancouver's emissions over that time period just from building heat. So that BC Housing Metrics Report recommendation, that 3 for All has adopted, does say this. We recommend BC local governments adopt step 3 for both Part 3 and Part 9 buildings as a progressive and affordable base code. The point that they're making in there is that they want to reduce the need for future retrofitting of those buildings because there's already enough housing stock out there that needs to be retrofitted to meet our climate goals. And so they don't want to, they're saying, why bother with step 2 when the cost is so marginal to go to 3 and the benefits are so big? So don't build in obsolescence. So that's their call. The Step Code Council has no say in which step to use. Again, that's those advocacy organizations that are calling for that. Oh, there's a nasty typo. I can fix that before the council meeting. So far 15 local governments have notified the province that they intend to reference the Step Code in their bylaws. The 4 on the top are the 5 I just mentioned up there. Surrey as well just announced in December. That's a city of almost 500,000 people and one of the fastest growing in the province. So they're building a lot of housing. And if they adopt the STEP code, that will make a significant difference in terms of building capacity as well. So building skills, building a market for those materials. Richmond as well, they're targeting just townhomes with their STEP code. There's all kinds of different ways that local governments can use it for specific kind of buildings or specific neighborhoods. So that's all laid out here. And then a bunch of Vancouver Island communities as well said that they're going to be using it. Finally, I think this is the last slide. You've been super patient. Love you very much. This is the Mayor of North Vancouver last October when they all voted to adopt Step 3. And again, that takes effect July 1st, and they're the first local government to use it. And all the council voted unanimously for this. So that's my presentation. How long did that run?
42 minutes.
Okay, I gotta cut some, probably that free-for-all stuff.
So, James, I may have missed this.
Okay?
Are those steps static or are they subject to review in a fixed period of time?
So they're all set and negotiated, but the government has said this is where we're starting, and they may adjust them based on experience or feedback. But that is.
For a 2-year or 5-year, whatever.
They haven't said that. The only thing they have said is that they're going to expand it to more building types and more regions of province. The high-rise stuff isn't available for the north yet because they're not building that many high-rise commercial industrial buildings. Also, the city of North Vancouver, when they approved this, the councillors, I watched the session, it was quite interesting. They said, well, we're going to be building a new Lionsgate Hospital extension inside our jurisdiction. Can we apply the STEP code? And no, it doesn't really apply to an institutional building like a hospital yet. And so they actually wrote a letter to the province saying, we want a STEP code specification that covers uses like hospitals. So they are like so on board. They're like, we don't want to build a new hospital that's going to be with us 50 years that has yesterday's energy
They're
performance.
not paying for it, I'll go. So it's really not easy for them to say that.
Well, the costs are just not that really significant. So that's a common misconception.
James,
Yeah.
do you know or have you been involved with like outreach local governments do with the building community? Do you know other examples of?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work being done, and West Van and North Van are 2 great places to start for that.
Yeah.
And Richmond as well and Surrey have been doing builders breakfasts, where they have a informal come on in before you start the day, get some muffins and whatever and talk about what this could mean and what it's going to require and how it works. And those have been really great for establishing relationships and also feeling out developers and builders on what they feel ready for, what they're worried about, and so forth. So if you'd like, I can connect you with some people that have done those to give you their outlines and so on.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that'd be great.
cool.
Yeah, we have sort of our homegrown building community here.
Yeah.
And plus, things,
Yeah.
materials tend to be more expensive
For
on
sure.
the island, so.
For sure. So I did this presentation, or a version of it, for a climate conversation in the fall, and Councillor Fast and Councillor Nicholson were there, and so was Wolfgang. He just showed up, and Councillor Nicholson turned to him and said, "What do you think about this?" And he says, "We should have done this 10 years ago," is what he said. And that's one of the biggest builders on island, and he's like, I talked to my friends in Germany, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing out there?" It's like you're building tree forts or something compared to the level of performance that's required in Europe. So he's ready for it. I don't know what John Reed thinks. I don't know what any other developers have thought about it. So,
I know that over Christmas I was on Galliano and was speaking to a friend who built houses there, and a lot of houses, and he figured they built everything at step 3 already, essentially. It was like any of the custom houses they built,
right,
except for the ones that were all glass, and those are the ones that were going to have problems, the ones who
right,
bought their view lot and want the glass walls
Right.
and stuff, they were going to be in trouble.
totally, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, 'cause I think like you said, the lower steps, it's a matter of, it's like better building and then just some better products.
It's
right?
more
like-
careful attention to the
Yeah.
envelope.
Going step 4 and step 5, you've got to sort of rethink how you're building it, but step
Exactly.
3 you could meet by just building it better.
Yeah, and by adopting some practices and some materials that are already available in the market,
Yeah.
just being more careful and thoughtful,
Yeah.
particularly around the envelope again, so.
Great.
Yeah, so, any other questions? or
Thank
comments?
you. Any
Very
more
good.
questions?
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Very welcome.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for having me, and
Yeah.
great questions, and there's a follow-up, I didn't write it down, somebody asked me something. Oh, I was gonna find out about fireplaces
So,
and,
cost analysis, we're gonna get the detailed cost analysis.
Right.
Where the,
I'll send that to you, Steph, to send to
yeah,
the
me or
to the group?
ABC,
Okay.
yeah, NBC.
Okay,
that's
got it.
right.
So I'll send the links for that so that you can dive in on the numbers and check the methodology and do all that stuff. And then also, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name already.
Greg.
Greg. So Greg, I'll send you a link to the compliance documentation. that
Yeah, I
they
have
just
them
developed.
actually.
You've got it, okay, great.
All that stuff. Been
Cool.
reviewing it
Perfect.
for a while.
Oh, awesome. Okay, and you can hang out of that, okay? And I will say good evening then. Go have some dinner. Oh, yeah. Yep. And that's mine. Great. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Greg, good to meet you.
Yep, see you again.
I'm sorry, it's your person. Sorry, I just wanted to word your ear. that's all.
Okay. New business, Daniel, you're on.
I have to look at it. I'm concerned about two things.
So, yes, today I have a referral for 391 Swall Road. So this is a rezoning application that came to council in November for introduction, and at that point referral to the Parks and Trails Committee and the APC.
Yes, I should have just
Yeah.
allowed people to walk across the park. Sorry, Dad.
That's okay.
Have the other committees dealt with this yet, or are we the first one?
So Park and Trails met in December, and they did a site visit Saturday, I think, which I actually haven't heard.
Sunday, yeah.
Sunday, sorry. Yep.
Okay. Did you hear about it?
No.
Yes, they're gonna do another one.
Okay.
I think they, no one at the property owner, no, they were coming. So it was awkward, and they were kind of smooching around. So what they're gonna do is notify all the property owners in that area. So their main concern is what to look to see the location.
Yeah.
So they're gonna let everyone know so they can kind of go off and on to private
Gotcha,
property with ease. So they will do another one. I just want to get on
Because
that.
I looked at the site too,
Yeah.
and it's really awkward. When you look at the trails map, it shows the trails just sort of going willy-nilly
Yeah.
across properties and everything,
Yeah.
which makes me sort of wonder how well thought out that whole thing was, and
Yeah.
whether this link, it looks like this link could be a good one to connect right on
Yeah.
down to Adams Road, but I don't know whether that's ever even possible.
Right, I mean, so yeah, we got the trail map from the OCP is sort of the conceptual, right? So it's like, it's literally saying, well, we want a connection to go here. That's just what it goes.
Yeah.
But it's not like ground proofed necessarily, right? It's like, these are
Yeah.
connections that we want. But yeah, so,
David has to leave, so maybe, can we just hear his concerns and then he can
Yeah.
go?
I'm sorry, I have to pick my
That's
wife
okay.
up down here at 8 o'clock. I have two concerns about
Yeah, we
this.
lose our quorum then.
Yes,
We
I
won't
know.
be able to act.
Oh,
I'm just looking at,
I had only two concerns about the subdivision. I like the idea of the pathway being provided, but at the same time, the owner of the property is asking to have his property reduced in size, and he's making a big deal about allowing this pathway through his property, but at the same time, he's going to be creating himself a $300,000 or $400,000 lot to which he was not entitled when he bought the property. And I personally think that the amendment should be greater than that. When you have an area upzoned so that a person can make more money out of it, if it applies to all the properties in that area, that's fine. But if it's just for one person, subdividing into small properties where his neighbors are not allowed to do it, I don't think it's a fair arrangement.
Yeah, it seems like it's a little more complex than that. As Daniel will probably explain, this was sold off before the other.
so he's surrounded by small lots.
so,
Surrounded
yeah, I mean,
small.
the surrounding lots, so the ones that are marked are R3B, were rezoned to allow the same size that he's asking for. As part of their rezoning, they were covenanted for a significant portion of them. The ones around Josephine Lake all have now environmental covenants that actually sort of protect the area around
Right.
the lake itself. So he's definitely, you know, as the owner has looked at it and thought, okay, you know, just being the same size as the neighboring lots maybe is, you know, then I fit in. But as David says, it is an upzoning for the one property, and while the surrounding lots have that same zoning, they were at the time of that subdivision, or that rezoning, there was sort of, you know, environmental conditions that were placed on them. So.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I've sort of looked at is, so the property is 2.5 hectares in size, and he's asking to go to a minimum lot size of 1 hectare. So I think, okay, there's like half a hectare, so like an acre of land that maybe, if the Parks and Trails think that that's appropriate, maybe it's not just a trail, but it's like a,
The swamp.
you know, it's a swath, essentially, connection, but some of that, like as you have, you know, gone to the site, sort of looked and thought, okay, it's not, I'm not sure, I'd want to hear from from Bonnie, who's the parks manager, and the parks committee, how feasible, like, is this something we want, right? Because one thing to say, okay, the amenity's great, we get an acre of land, it's a greenway and a park and it's protected, but if it's not
Yeah,
something that's useful, well then, you know, there's no point saying we want to take it just so that we've taken it.
there's some extreme topography in that property
Mhm.
too. So I would imagine that, it sort of concerns me a bit that they just chop it off with offering a trail, which may or may not ever be useful.
Yeah.
So, but David, if you have to go,
I know, I
and
messed
you
things
can't
up.
be here, then we can't, we probably should have taken this up first.
Sorry.
I feel like this is, I always think, I gave James an hour, and then we could have decided, I guess, what, he said he only needs 30 minutes, it's the story of my life, everyone always needs longer. Is it 8 o'clock that the period?
So, I mean, actually,
You have to leave
like,
at
so
8.
if the Parks and Trails is gonna be scheduling a site visit, is that something the APC, we could circulate to the APC could join, and then we could discuss it then at the February meeting?
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Because I feel really uncomfortable, because it really is so dependent on what the
Yeah.
other committees think. And so if we could, that's a great way to handle it, if we can.
Well, there's two issues really, is it can he only have, is people's point of view that he can only have a subdivision if he gives amenities to someone? Or, like, is it, you know, how much will you give us, and we'll give you something in return, which I find sort of offensive. But if it really is a trail that's gonna be useful, then that's, you know, I think that's a very
Well,
good thing.
Also seeing what the developability of that land. I mean, looking at it, just coming in
Yeah.
off the road, boy, that doesn't look to be a lot of flat land to build on.
I think they're like, right, so obviously the house is up in here.
Yeah,
It's cleared, you know, like up in, I think this was
Right
the
there.
site maybe that's cleared for another site,
yeah.
but then it does drop off a fair bit, so, you know, on the OCP trail map, that's what's shown for the trail as opposed to
Where they put the house.
where they put the house, so it's like, you know, if we said, well, gee, you can do it, but we want, you know, this middle acre, maybe that's great, and that's where the trail could go, and but then it leaves, if there's no building area left, then it seems kind of
Yeah.
Is it very steep to the south?
capricious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, but you could, like, there's lots of houses that can
Like,
be built.
you know, I was in trouble
Drainage
going
area
saying what's steep,
goes
but it's
through.
like, well, it's,
It's not,
It's
yeah,
not
it's not,
flat.
it's not flat, but it's not wildly steep. But the easiest place to get to is the top where it's cleared, because there's already a, access.
yeah.
Which I guess the trails would like, because then they wouldn't have to do anything.
It'd be flat.
Yeah. So,
And because people prefer to walk it if it's flat too. necessarily.
May I give my vote to somebody as I leave temporarily?
I don't think so. I think the thing to do, if everybody's in agreement, is let's join the Trails Committee on a site visit and then raise the issue at our next meeting, if that's okay.
and also, is that the issue?
Yeah, I mean, so generally, like on
It's
board, we have, you know, through rezonings, we seek amenities, like every
Yeah.
sort of
Well,
community
but-
does.
but
You-
also
yeah, people
just
question
seeing-
how fair it is, but and how much, yeah, it's always a question, how fair is it? Like if somebody
Yeah.
provides lots of amenities, and somebody else says, well, I can't do that, and they don't, and it's sort of the first person says, well, that wasn't fair.
But if there is, but, you know, you can only have so many trails to nowhere.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I mean, we have in other rezonings, people do sometimes end up paying cash essentially. So like the Arbutus Ridge rezoning, which now is coming for subdivision, they have covenants that say they're gonna pay so much towards the community center. I think Evergreen ended up paying so much per lot towards the turf field that got built. So we have at various times gotten amenities for other things. It's always easier for the person rezoning to give land if they're getting more units, because okay. So when you look at the map, like I always look on my wall, I've got this land use bylaw map. You can see the rezonings and see, okay, this CD zone, you can see this one is the park, and this is the lots around it. And it, you know, it often ends up being, it's like, on some of the big ones, it's like half the land. Some of them it's like 30% of the land, but it can be quite significant. You know, sometimes we end up with the land that, you know, they can't build on, right? So we get the creek and the steep part, because they can't build it, but they say it's, well, it's the ecologically sensitive area because it's the creek, so it's, maybe it's good for us to protect it. And,
I'd feel more comfortable actually seeing
yeah,
the
yeah,
land.
yeah.
Is that okay with you, David?
That's fine with me. I apologize for this. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought that 8 o'clock would be reasonable
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've ever gotten out of here at either.
No, but it seemed like a pretty easy
Yeah.
Yeah.
subdivision.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, thanks, David.
But I'm happy to take more questions from people for background, and we can keep talking about it, and then.
Well, you want to just go through the presentation, and then we'll be better prepared for the walk.
Sure. I'm gonna send you this, the crux of it is right now in the zone, minimum average lot area of 2 hectares. So the lot is 2.5 hectares in size, so you could get 1 lot out of it. They would want to change it to RR3B, which says it has a minimum, well, removes the minimum average lot area and leaves the minimum lot area, so you could have 2 lots that are each 1 hectare in size. And then,
So,
yeah.
So while we're on that map, you were just getting,
Yep.
right? So all these are a hectare?
Let me find the zoning one here. These are R3B.
Okay.
These are R3B. These ones up in here. This one, funnily enough, is actually RR3D, and it's mislabeled in my zoning map I discovered. But these ones are all the 1 hectare. These are all the 1 hectare, and these ones are all the 1 hectare.
Okay.
So you could look and say, okay, changing to RR3B, you know, it would be the same then as the neighbor. It's not like this would be the odd one where it's much smaller. But as part of this rezoning, there were environmental covenants placed on significant portions of the lot.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, yeah, this is the map that in our OCP that says what are the trails that are identified, what are the trail connections, and so it's showing, okay, we want to try to get through to the Crown Land, and then there'd be a route up, or at the very least, there'd be a route out to here, and then potentially is a, you know, walking route. That's all I've got.
Okay.
So to join John Lord's trail to the, like cutting across the lake, that's through lots of people's private property.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't do, it just isn't gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah. It could connect then to, there is actually a trail with Forest Ridge, or through here, so you'd be able to connect around and get back down, or it's connecting up. So
Yeah.
no, I mean, like that's almost the challenge with a lot of the times when we have these sort of trail connections, is they may cross, you know, 4 lots. And we would say, well, we can now get the trail connection across 2 of them, but it doesn't actually bring you the trail until you've sort of connected all the way.
Yeah, I almost wonder if we can't, before we do this and identify the trail and where exactly it goes, if we couldn't work with adjacent property owners to see if we couldn't actually make a realistic connection.
But it's not gonna happen unless it goes around the edge of the properties. So no one's gonna have it go through their houses, and across the lake, walking on water.
To try,
Well,
yeah, to connect
along
those.
the property line edge.
Yeah, well, you can, yeah, finish going up Zilal and then over.
Yeah, I mean, because, that trail should really make
Yeah.
sense going along there. That's
Yeah.
actually just
But
a
then that's-
wooded area.
Yeah, unless somebody wants to subdivide, why would they want a trail going between their properties?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then.
So that's not gonna happen.
Somewhere in there or something. There's sort of no active group that's trying to get some of this done. Is there anybody working on actually making these connections or sitting back and waiting?
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's, you know,
For somebody to
we sit back and wait
volunteer.
for somebody to come forward to. I know that, there's a Parks Master Plan that they've just completed, and then the next stage from that is their trail plan, and it's meant to have some sort of acquisition piece to it as well. Because right now, you're right, we don't actively, we don't actively search out the connections, we kind of just go,
No,
okay.
but it just sort of seems crazy. They do these lines and right through people's properties when you could just go along the back of the property and then it might happen.
Yeah.
Because
I
it
mean-
could be on Crown land.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Mhm. I mean, I think these maps
I could just.
essentially end up being,
Yeah,
well, one, I don't think they didn't necessarily update it to match the lines with the, you know, like, because now you'd say, oh, okay, there's a road up to here, and then, you know, this isn't saying the trail has to go here. It's more sort of like, okay, what are the
Oh.
connections that you want? So yeah, you know, if the trail came up here and went straight through, we'd say, okay, we've met that.
Yeah, because otherwise,
trail.
people would think, oh, well, that's exactly where the trail's gonna go. This, obviously, clearly, the trail won't follow that line, but it'll have to find some way to
Yeah.
do so.
So I think, yeah, this is probably the schedule in the OCP that I get the most grief about, because people go either, you know, why are you trying to trail across my land, or the circles are meant to be parks, and so again, people whose property is circled by a circle think, this is terrible, you're gonna turn my house into a park, how dare you? But it's sort of trying to identify, okay, what are gaps that we have, and what are connections we want.
Yeah, I mean, we need to maybe talk to council about getting some maybe tax incentives or something for
Mhm.
granting easements or.
Yeah.
doing some things like that.
There's a NAPCAT, that's an incentive to preserve your land. So it's not trails, but it's to say we're not gonna, so eventually fence it off and make it nature preserve. You can get tax incentives. Yeah.
That's your turn.
Okay, so that's the presentation.
That's the presentation. It's fairly straightforward. You know, there's like straightforward but interesting question.
It is, and it raises
Yeah,
bigger
yeah.
questions.
Yeah. So we will work on figuring out when the next site visit is, and then we'll bring this back then to the February meeting.
Yeah, because it would be good to just sort of be able to visit with the parks, trails
Yeah.
people, to
Yeah.
sort of investigate what can be done. Because this is a prime example of an opportunity that could be expanded and be something worthwhile. Good. Thanks. Well, I guess we can't conduct any more business.
I know.
We have no quorum, so I declare us adjourned.
Okay.
Perfect.
All in favor?
We don't have a quorum. We can't vote.
You can't adjourn now.
Oh, we can't adjourn, yeah. Yes, sure. Going.